American National is proud to support No Ceiling, helping to tell the stories of professional women. American National is dedicated to providing paths for leadership and advancement through the Women's Forum, a group of female leaders who provide encouragement, mentorship, and advocacy for American National female employees. With 4 corporate locations in Galveston and League City, Texas, Albany, New York, and Springfield, Missouri, the opportunities for leadership advancement are vast. American National believes taking care of business starts with taking care of its employees.
They told me after, they were like, we interviewed you as a courtesy because you were an internal candidate, but every step of the way, you managed to give us something that we were looking for the future of the organization. And
Today's guest is Brandy Harris. In 2019, she was hired as the CEO of Boys and Girls Club of Springfield after working for the children's nonprofit for nearly a decade. Her love of kids and passion for helping them succeed in school and at home stems from a really dark childhood. Brandy shared with us stories of abuse she faced at the hands of her stepdads, crippling poverty, and constantly moving. She said she finally felt at home when she came to Springfield. That's when she learned through her relationships with teachers and principals that it really just takes one caring adult to change a child's life. Brandy also opens up about becoming a CEO in her 30s and the imposter syndrome she still fights against, and how she shifted operations this year to keep meeting the ever-present need of kids, even as the clubs were closed. From SBJ Podcasts, I'm Christine Temple, and this is No Ceiling, a show that goes in-depth with local women, sharing their journey to the top of their professions, and the challenges and triumphs they faced along the way. They're rewriting the script on success, and there's no ceiling. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Brandy.
thank you so much for having me, Christine. I really do enjoy being around you. So
everyone knows you, of course, as the CEO of Boys and Girls Club. You took this position last year in April.
Yes.
And congrats on that. But I want to go back further because, you know, what I think is really incredible about your story is that I don't know that anyone, if they were betting on your life, would imagine you'd be a CEO. I mean, because of the struggles that you experienced as a kid, and the fact that you were one of the kids that would have been served by the mission that you lead now. Tell me first about the circumstances in which you grew up, because you moved a lot and you were really poor.
Yes.
So, I mean, let's just, bring me back to that time. Tell me about it.
Yeah. And first, you said, I think there were a lot of people who would not expect me to be a CEO right now, and I am constantly one of those people. Mm-hmm. I really do look at my life now, and I think, how on earth did I get here? And I think going through this process with you and talking about my story and my life, I think is very important for me, because while a lot of it is dark and a lot of it is incredibly unfortunate, I truly believe has given me the passion and the skill set necessary to fight for and to serve kids today. So I moved around a lot. I was born in Florida. My mom then moved to Connecticut. I was an infant. I attended 13 different schools before I moved here in 1999 for my 8th grade year. And, a lot of people ask, oh, was your dad in the military? Like, why did you move around so much? And honestly, no. My mom has been married several times, and each one of those marriages led us to a different state, city, school, etc. So the majority of my younger childhood was in Connecticut, but a number of different schools there. I then moved to West Virginia, back to Connecticut, then to Ohio, then to Springfield. Mm-hmm. And my family moved when I graduated high school. I went to Hillcrest High School, graduated, and at 18, something about this city it was the first place I was able to call home, and I really wanted to stay here. And at 18, I made the decision, and honestly, when I think back on it, it's kind of like, how did I do that at 18 years old? But I decided to stay here, go to Drury. My family moved to Texas, and I just, moved around a lot. We're incredibly, incredibly poor. A lot of unfortunate things happened with a lot of those people that my mom was married to, and just a lot of darkness in my life, which is not something I really embraced until I became much older or really talked about. I kind of just acted like it didn't exist and that I was living a different life outside of who I was as a child.
And as much as you want to talk about it, what were some of those challenges that you faced from the men in your life who were supposed to be protectors?
Yeah. So it started with, I've never met my biological father. He, in all of this, obviously is secondhand to me because I was an infant or in my mother at the time. So he made it very clear that it was my mom had to choose between having me or being with him, and attempted to, this is as bluntly as I can put it, just like kill me while I was inside my mother. So my mom talks to me about that experience a lot and how damaging that was for her and how it could have been damaging for me. Unfortunately, it wasn't. Like physically wasn't. I mean, emotionally, it's not the greatest thing to hear. So she chose me, and then she moved to Connecticut to be closer to her family. And then my sister's dad was in the picture, and he kind of raised me during those young formative years. And then my sister was born, who instantly became my best friend. And then he left, and I think he was just done with being a parent to us. And being a parent is hard. I get it, and I don't have any, I have a lot of feelings about it, but most of them are about how negatively that relationship affected my sister. Because for me, my biological father, I've never met him. So that's in some ways a lot easier than having a biological father who's in and out of your life all the time, because it's unpredictable and it's awful. And that's kind of what he was for her. And it's my sister's still processing that and dealing with it, but she's, yeah. The next husband was, I think, my first introduction to like a lot of the chaos in my life, I think, started in third grade. And that's when he entered our life. And it was emotional and physical and sexual abuse on a regular basis. And a lot of times there was part of me, like my sister became my best friend, and there was part of me that was like, I am her protector. My mom was always at work. And I truly believe my mom tried her best to do everything that she could to provide for us. It's just that the people that were in our lives did not do that. I mean, in this particular one, like, I'll just kind of give you an example, because this is something that has stayed with me for a very long time. I was very afraid of the dark growing up. I mean, I still kind of am, let's be honest. Darkness is scary sometimes, but I was very afraid of the dark, and everyone in my household knew that. And I would sleep, my sister and I shared a bedroom, and I would sleep with the door open and the hall light on. And that hall light was peace for me. Like, I would wake up a lot in the middle of the night, and I would see it and feel fine. And one night, he thought it would be funny, I guess, to turn off that light and shut the door and wake me up by knocking on the door. And I woke up in a complete panic, right? Like, I could not see anything. I couldn't escape. I couldn't get out of that situation. And it was incredibly, incredibly scary. And I was screaming, and my mom came in and helped get me out of that situation. And he was just kind of in the background laughing about it and talking about how funny it was. So that's just like the most comfortable story I can probably tell you about this particular individual. But that's the kind of chaos that was created for me on a regular basis. And honestly, like, it was just difficult, and I'll never forget that moment. After a couple of years there, we moved again, and my mom married someone who arguably was probably the worst of the bunch. It was about 2 years of repeated sexual abuse over and over again, and physical abuse. And honestly, I think the hardest part there for me, too, is just the unpredictability around everything. Like, you never knew what the day was going to bring, or what kind of mood this person was going to be in, or what kind of role I needed to play for my sister or my mom, or, like, how was I going to get through school. Moving around so much also, like, you're at different levels every new city that you're in. I literally had to kind of, like, teach myself how to read. And that is so unbelievably hard for a child. And I can see it every day at the Boys and Girls Club now. So I really tried to use a lot of these experiences to help inform how I serve and how deeply I care for kids now. Because my story is unique because it's mine, but honestly, it's not unique. Our kids are forced almost every single day to like grow up before they should grow up. And for like a brief moment, kids get to come to a Boys and Girls Club and be a kid. They can like eat Cheetos and like play air hockey and learn things and not deal with, life and growing up when you're supposed to be a kid. And that's why I think I'm so grateful to use really terrible experiences and reframe them now to help me be a fierce warrior for protecting kids. It's like my mission and what I want to do with my life. And I think, as unfortunate as so many instances in my life where honestly it was not every day was terrible, but until I moved here in 8th grade, most of my days were terrible. And I think what was different about coming here in 8th grade was like, I think it was the first time a teacher saw me and gave me an opportunity beyond just like, you can do this extra thing, or you can do this thing, you can help me with the yearbook, or you can like, there's something special inside of you and you're not really your circumstance. You're not your experience. You can be something else. And that's why I think when I say that Springfield is the first place I was able to call home, I truly, truly mean that.
Yeah. After those experiences, I mean, you say that Springfield felt like a home for the first time. And I mean, but what were the things that people were saying to you, or the or opportunities people were giving you within that school system, at Reed?
Yeah.
What kind of like brought you back to life a little bit?
And you never realize in the moment how impactful those things are until you're examining your life as an adult and thinking, how did I get here? There were so many teachers and coaches, all women, at Reed and at Hillcrest. At Hillcrest, there were men and women, but at Reed, Miss Frederick, Coach Karen Gordon, Judy Bruner was the principal at the time. The things that they did are not extraordinary. They just saw me and gave me opportunities. Judy Bruner let me dance to NSYNC in her office. And Coach Gordon said that I could be good at basketball and didn't give up on me when I didn't make a basket. Linda Frederick said, I'd like for you to be my student aide during 8th block because you've got good writing ability and you can help me with yearbook. Someone saw me in the hallway and like just saw me. That's like, it's not remarkable things that they did. They were just small gestures that made me believe that I could be bigger or better than my circumstance. And in 8th grade, I'll remember it was like the first time I told a joke. Like, I love making people laugh, right? And I like being happy as well. And it was like the first time I felt like I could actually do that. And like the things I was worried about at school were not, am I going to be able to read? Am I going to be able to answer this math question? Am I going to be made fun of for not like showering or eating or whatever the thing was because we were very poor? It wasn't that. It was like the things I was worried about were like, is JC from NSYNC like thinking about me? Things that kids, I feel like, should be worried about. But it was these teachers in the school system that gave me this like break from like chaos is really the only way I can describe it.
At what point did you start processing through what happened? Because I mean, there's some people that like trauma goes away for a while and then it emerges even, in adulthood, and maybe things you didn't even remember.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, like, what was that process like for you?
Oh my gosh. The first time I shared any part of my experience was in 12th grade. At Hillcrest, I felt Hillcrest and Reed were the places where I felt the absolute safest in my entire childhood. And I don't really know how it happened, but I was interviewed for something from HTV, and I got to share a glimpse of my story. And at that time, it was fine, and people were very kind. And I went a long time without really having any issues about it. Then I was about to get married at 26. And I'm married to the love of my life. I'm literally married to the best thing that's ever been born. Right before I was about to get married, 4 months, I had a panic attack for the first time. And I thought, okay, I don't know what this is. And I ended up in the hospital because I was like, I'm 100% dying. Wow. And 4 months before getting married to him, and I didn't realize at the time my body was reacting. I started seeing a therapist, and we realized that you're about to make a life decision and get married, and the only male figures you've known in your life, or the only people your mom has ever been married to, have been awful. So, and I didn't realize any of that. Your body reacts, or trauma comes and goes as it pleases. Grief does as well. Like, there's no recipe for it. And my therapist is so incredible now. He talks about how grief is like this pendulum, and it comes and goes, and there will be good days and there will be bad days, because I've always been waiting for this like magical moment where I am a functioning adult and I no longer am affected by my past. And once I let that go and realize like things are going to trigger it, I'm going to have to deal with it and reframe it, and I'm going to have to be okay with it because I can't change any of it. So that was kind of the first mental health crisis I had was at 26 before I was getting married, and that lasted for a very long time. Then a lot of these things started to come back when I first started my journey as CEO. So in April of 2019, and you know, there's a lot of reasons for that. There have been 5 CEOs before me in 81 years, and I look and I think and I act very differently from all of them. And there were a lot of people in this community that did not want me to have this job. And were not very afraid of telling me that. And it's kind of like, what happened to people writing in their journals or talking behind my back? Like, that would be so much better than some of the things that people said to me. Wow. And I think a lot of the verbiage or the things that were said to me during that time really got in my head. And I think a lot of leaders, especially female leaders, especially minority leaders, they have imposter syndrome. And there are a lot of times where they will think there's no way I am capable of doing this thing. And then when you have people telling you that, it just brings up a lot. It brings up a lot of like how many inadequacies I have, or how I'm not capable of doing X, Y, or Z because of my age, or because of like, name it. I don't know. It's just, it's very difficult to deal with. And I entered a very dark time during the beginning of my tenure. I mean, I literally was a couple of months in and I wrote a resignation letter to the board president, said there's no way I can do this anymore. Wow. Emotionally, for my mental health, I am constantly in chaos. And that is a feeling that I worked really hard to get out of. Yeah. And it's here again, and it's like I'm kind of doing it to myself. But yeah, it was so hard. And again, therapy and medication have helped me significantly. And I think it's important to talk about that, because life is like so hard for everyone. And I think being open about how important mental health is important. So
when you were experiencing those things in your first couple months as CEO, where, I mean, that was kind of abusive behavior that you were experiencing, it sounds like, from the community. I mean, it's like, does trauma like revert? Like, were you that little girl again? Do you see, you know what I'm saying?
Oh God, I know what you're saying. And what you have just described is exactly what happened. And please just remember, I just said, I'm just now on the opposite end of it now. Like, I hated that little girl. So all that just is back again, and you hate everything about yourself, and you think, I'm the worst person for this job, because right now, some people are saying I'm no longer giving you money to Boys and Girls Club because I don't think you should be the CEO. Okay, so I've lost money for kids now. Great. You're not capable. You don't have the experience. You're only 32. You've never been a CEO before. okay, maybe I wasn't the right choice for this. And then you just spiral, right? You literally spiral. And then I will tell you, I wrote that letter and I printed it out and I didn't sign it. I read it. And the good thing is that our administrative office is connected to a Boys and Girls Club. So what I did was kind of like, I'm going to go for a walk around the club, mostly to like hug kids and say goodbye, really. And I took a lap. And at this time, it was pre-COVID, so the club was full, 200 plus kids.
Yeah.
And I walked around that building. And I had this, I walked around that building and I saw kids being kids, reading, playing video games, on their computers, like being kids, like, and a little girl came up to me and asked me who I was. And I said, I'm Miss Brandy. And she said, what are you? And I was like, that's like a weird question, but okay. I'm the CEO. What's a CEO? And then I described it to her and she said, well, I want to be a CEO now. And I'm like, I feel like I'm going to throw up crying right now, honestly, because that moment, and just think about the timing. Like, it's not, this job is not about me. I have to take care of myself. I know that. And I was not well then. But this job is bigger than that. Like, there is no one in my life that I can think of that cares more about protecting children than I do. Honestly, there are people who definitely care, but it is like in my bones and in my blood. And protecting children comes in a lot of different ways, not just like in the normal sense of protection, but also like providing opportunity, ensuring that they're on this path for success, ensuring that they can see themselves as someone outside of their experience or circumstance. And I just think that moment was meant to happen to me at that day during that time. And I threw the letter away and I'm still here. And honestly, yeah, it's very hard. It's the hardest job ever that I've ever had to do, but at the same time, it's also the most rewarding. So
at the same time that you're experiencing that in your first few months, I mean, you pursued this role.
Yeah.
And when you were selected, the board president talked about your passion and your unique qualifications to inspire around a mission. So, I mean, what that little girl kind of brought you back into like reminding yourself maybe about that, but like, why did you want the job to begin with?
That whole process was very difficult. It was a 5-month interview process. Started with 100 candidates and then down to like, they told me this before, but I probably blacked it out. 100 to 50. There was a semifinal round of 6 and then a final round of 2.
Wow.
And it was, every time I was told too, Brandy, we're just interviewing you as a courtesy, right? Like, you're an internal candidate. They didn't tell me that during. They told me that after I got the position. That would be very...
That's awful.
No. They told me after. They were like, we interviewed you as a courtesy because you were an internal candidate. Wow. But every step of the way, you managed to give us something that we were looking for the future of the organization. And I hold on to that because, as I've mentioned before, there's a lot of doubt, especially during my first year, about am I capable of doing this? And there was a committee, of 10 very capable, prominent people in the community who had to make this decision. Yeah. And I wanted this job for a number of reasons. So one happened when I was in high school. And I've shared this story a number of times, but every time I share it, it becomes more powerful for me. And I want everyone to know it because it has shaped who I am today. So I'm in high school. I'm learning about myself. I'm like academically excelling. I'm really involved in speech and debate and student council and involved in just trying to like make the world a better place. And I get nominated for homecoming queen as a senior, which thank you for being excited about that, because it's like, why, you're 34. Why are you talking about that?
That's amazing.
Yeah, totally. And I'm telling you, from going from having 0 friends and then being nominated for something that like in a textbook tells you like people maybe like you, it was magical for me. Wow. So I was very excited for a couple of minutes, and then instantly that kind of turned to dread, because there was this tradition where every homecoming queen candidate had to wear a white dress. And my mom had already, there was like this hand-me-down dress that she sewed to fit me. Again, very poor. There was no way I could ask my mom for a new dress, and it had to be white, which is like a wedding dress, by the way. Like, where else do you, yeah. And it has to be like a formal white dress. It's just, it was a lot. So I was very stressed about that because I knew the only option here is to wear this pink, black, and it had a little bit of white in it, this original dress. And I'm going to stand out. Like, people are going to know. And it's going to be uncomfortable, but what other option is there? The very next day, Dr. Julie Leith, who was my principal in high school, who still remains a mentor for me to this day, she's just a little meaner now to me, but she's very, very a very important part of my life. So the very next day, she calls my mom into the office and gives her $200 and says, "Go buy Brandy the dress of her dreams." I never had to say anything. And two things happened in that moment. First, she had a pulse on her students. She knew their needs without even knowing their needs. Yeah. And then second is that she made me feel in that moment, you're more than your experience or your circumstance. And there are people who can help you get through very dark times in your life, or people who can help you feel normal. Right? That moment was kind of like set the trajectory for my professional career. I knew that I wanted to work with kids. My very first professional job was a high school teacher at my alma mater, Hillcrest High School. Wow. So I went back there to kind of like pour in as much as it gave to me. But then my husband was getting his PhD at KU in Lawrence. And I moved to Lawrence for 2 years. It was very hard for me to leave Springfield, but I loved my husband, and that's just what you do in life. So moved to Lawrence and could not find a job, and I'm not exaggerating. 62 jobs, applied for them, did not receive one call back. And it was months, right? It was months not being able to find a job. I thought I would continue teaching, but I moved at a very weird time, and there were no teaching positions available. So about couple of months after looking for jobs, the Boys and Girls Club called me and said, "We want you to be our AmeriCorps staff, and your pay is $300 a month." And I thought, better than $0 a month. I'm going to take it, and I'm going to be like, I'm not better than any position here, so like I'm going to give it my all. After 6 weeks on that job, I realized the Boys and Girls Club is all the best parts of teaching, and this is the career that I'm going to make for myself. And I told myself, you will be running a Boys and Girls Club. I did not expect to be doing it at one this large at 32, but I knew in my heart the mission of the club, what it stood for, and the impact that I feel like I could have on kids, and how it would not be like a job for me. It would be something, it would just be my passion in action. So that moment in high school helped me frame what I wanted to do. That really unfortunate not being able to find a job but getting a call from a Boys and Girls Club, that moment helped shape what I was going to do. And then when this position came up, I thought, there's no way, right? Like, I've been with the club for, at the time, it was 7 years. Okay. Taught for 3 years. I have experience. Do I have CEO experience? No. Do I have experience of doing things that a CEO does? Yeah. I'm just going to try. And I worked very, 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 very hard during that process. I got a call from board president Chris Myers at the time at 3:15, which is exactly the time where kids start funneling into a Boys and Girls Club. So I was trying to manage that and also like be calm, cool, and collected while I'm being offered the job of literally my dreams at 32 years old. And I immediately hung up the phone. Well, I let him finish talking to me before I hung up, but I hung up the phone and then I called my husband because I had permission to share with him. I had to keep it quiet for a while, but I was just over the moon. I honestly couldn't believe it. But there's part of me, a small part of me that could believe it, because here's what happened during this process. I had a phone interview. That was the first thing a phone interview. Okay. And that's always nerve-wracking, right? Because I want to be able to kind of feed off the audience. My speech and debate training has just embedded that in me, but I couldn't. I dressed up, acted like it was an in-person interview, and I did it. I didn't expect to get the next round callback, which was an in-person interview. And in that in-person interview, I left and I had some regrets. I was like, there were a couple of things that I wanted to highlight that I didn't actually highlight, and I have a lot of regrets about it. So I sent a follow-up email just saying, look, I am so grateful for the opportunity to interview. Here's something that I really wanted to talk to you about but neglected to. And then I got a call for the final round, which was where I had to present a SWOT analysis, so the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the current organization. And I knew going into that final round, the feeling that I had after semifinal round was unacceptable. I'm not going to have any regrets after I leave here. I'm going to lay it all on the table. I'm going to do everything that I possibly can. So if I do not get this position, I know that I'm just not the best candidate. There was nothing that I could have done differently. I wanted to leave feeling very confident, and I did. And I'm very happy about that.
When we come back, Brandy opens up about the external and internal pressures she faced after becoming CEO and why she believes everyone could benefit from therapy. Support for Season 1 of this podcast is provided by presenting sponsor American National Insurance. We'll be right back.
Success comes a little easier when you have trusted day in, day out support. At Great Southern Bank, you'll have your own go-to team of financial experts to rely on and learn from, and who'll be there with you every step of the way. Because every leader deserves a great team behind her. Learn more at greatsouthernbank.com, ranked a Forbes 2020 World's Best Bank by our customers. Thank you. Member FDIC.
Springfield Business Journal has been the business authority for over 40 years. SBJ strives to provide the most relevant, timely, and accurate business news you need to make important decisions. Locally owned and operated, Springfield Business Journal helps businesses market themselves to other businesses. Since 75% of the readers are the owner, GM, or VP at the business, SBJ helps your business influence decision makers when it matters most. If you need to raise your profile when businesses are considering your category of service, make sure you are differentiating yourself by using the Springfield Business Journal.
At what point did the fear set in? Was it as soon as you got the call and you were excited and then you're like, oh shoot, I got this?
No. Honestly, I think I was a little naive when I was just like, oh my gosh, everything is going to be great and everyone is going to love and support the direction of the Boys and Girls Club and everyone's going to love and support me and I'm going to open clubs on every street and everything. I was a little, I don't know if naive is the right word because I was really hopeful.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't think that's a bad thing. Mm-hmm. The fear set in after the first couple of months when I started getting feedback from people just on their thoughts about me in this role. And I will be honest, 90% of it was very positive, but the negative takes up a lot more space and took up a lot because I also obviously had insecurities going into this, right? Like and then when you hear it from somebody else, those insecurities are validated. And you're like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I can't do this. I think fear was also, like, I'm going to just be real for a second. I lost myself during those first 3 months. I truly was like trying to become what I thought a CEO was. Like even how I dressed. Like, oh, this is how a CEO is supposed to dress. This is how a CEO is supposed to talk. This is here's the recipe for a CEO. And I completely lost myself in that. And in retrospect, what I sold to the committee during that interview process was not what I was giving them because they chose me based on what I truly am.
Yeah.
And then I just started like hearing negative feedback, hearing people say like, I'm no longer supporting the club because you're the CEO or because you're a woman. Like those are things that people actually said. That's not movie life. Like that's real life. And then you just start to doubt yourself constantly. And then it's like, well, maybe if I fit this recipe or if I have this specific ingredient that a CEO traditionally has, maybe I'll be better. No, I wasn't. And I lost focus. It became more about me fitting a definition of a CEO instead of me being the CEO I know that the organization needed. And once I was able to make that shift, my life was better.
Yeah.
Also, we opened a new club. We have another club that's about to open. Organizational clarity, we're working on it. Like, we're hiring people and putting the right people in the right places. Once I got past that hump, but it took a long time. And I really believe there are so many leaders, especially in this community, who experience similar things, but don't really talk about it, because the worst part of all of that is feeling like no one understands you. No one gets it, and you're completely alone, and you're the one that doesn't understand the world. But honestly, like, this stuff happens a lot to a lot of people.
Had you seen a therapist prior to that? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Peppered throughout my life. I've had some very good experiences and some very bad experiences. But yes, I have.
Because I've heard when people talk about CEOs that so many of them are seeing a therapist or should see a therapist, but no one's talking about that because, well, that's a sign of weakness. And our culture and our communities are reframing that conversation at this moment. But what did they help you with? Because you're the one that has to do the work.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I have said this before, and I'm going to say it again. There is no recipe or ingredient you need to possess in order to feel valued, understood, and heard. I have had so many people in my life talk about how, well, yeah, I can understand why you see a therapist because you've had a hard life. Every single one of us has had a hard life. I don't care. Life is very difficult, and navigating it alone or thinking that you have to navigate it alone is very sad. And if anybody needs to hear that they need permission to connect to a mental health professional, just consider this your permission, please. My life is significantly better because I have someone who can, honestly, sometimes it's really difficult in a therapy session. Like, we're reliving, or I'm describing something very traumatic or awful that has happened, and then we're working together to try to reframe it so it can be something that is good for me. Other times it's just like, I need to vent to you about things that are not professional for me to vent about in public or like on a podcast. You know what I mean? We all need that space and that person. And for me, a lot of it, like, my closest friends were Boys and Girls Clubs of Springfield employees before I got this position. And when I became CEO, you have to create those boundaries with people, because now my role is different. And for me, that was very hard, because people who I would just like decompress with and like talk about work with, those people, that didn't happen anymore. So I needed to find a new circle for that specific need that I had. But what was so great about my therapist is that he is like, it is a space for whatever I need in that moment. It doesn't always have to be like, hey, I'm here to talk to you about childhood trauma. Sometimes I just want to talk to you about how I'm annoyed with somebody. You know what I mean? And it's helpful because it is a safe space that can help you just understand the world around you and help you take control of it. Because so many times in our professional lives and our personal lives, we feel like we're not in control of things. And a therapist can help you navigate that. I wish everyone could. And I'm very, very passionate about mental health, especially now. So COVID, no one is exempt from the power of COVID-19, and it has affected every single one of us in a different way. And the mental health need across our communities, across Boys and Girls Club, across the staff, across me, I mean, it is through the roof right now. And that's why, we just actually signed an agreement with Burrell to increase our capacity for providing therapists to Boys and Girls Club kids and families for free. Wow. It's remarkable to be able to do that with an awesome partner like Burrell. But it's important. And I want people to understand that it's just, there's always like these cliches and t-shirts that like mental health is health. Like it is. It absolutely is, honestly. So yeah, you got to do a lot of work, but you also have to get to that point where you're ready to do the work and where you're ready to kind of like take control of your life. And a therapist can help you navigate that, because it's impossible to do on your own. Okay, it's not impossible to do on your own, but it is much more difficult to do on your own, and you don't have to.
Is mental health or trauma something that you anticipate you will ever conquer?
No.
Or this is a journey for, Talk about that too, because, I think that there's not like a magic bullet
No.
for any of this. And we talked about how it can come back. I mean, you're 32 years old and you're feeling like you're back in that childhood moment. So talk about the journey of mental health too. And also for people who maybe are not on that journey, but are witnessing that.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I think as employers, that gets a little tricky, but I think you paint the culture for me is so important at our organization because we've got people doing really hard work, really hard but important work. And I think the more openly we can talk about mental health, the more we can create a culture that embraces our employees to be able to express those concerns to us, I think is incredibly important. Just like you would say, I have to go to the doctor today, I'm taking a sick day.
Yeah.
I have to disconnect, or I have to go see my therapist, I am taking a mental health day.
Yeah.
Like, to me, those things are kind of synonymous. And I know there's some negative rep around mental health days, but mental health is real and it has to be prioritized. And I do think it starts with the CEO in an organization. I think it's my responsibility to create that culture for our team. I do not expect college-age students who are on the front lines with kids, who are managing college work, who are learning curriculum to teach kids, who have now become, in the wake of COVID, who have become kind of like, have taken on similar roles to a teacher. I mean, there's just so many things that they're balancing. And it is important for them to know that I understand and that as an organization, we prioritize mental health, not just for our kids, but also for our staff and our families. So I think for so long, people, like, having depression or anxiety was like, you're not a stable human being. And that's actually not at all what it means. I think the majority of people in our community have experienced it or are living it and are functioning adults.
Yeah.
It's just harder. And I think it's easy to say we need to talk about it more, we need to normalize it. We actually need to, like, give our people in our lives permission. I think a lot of people are just waiting for someone to say, it's okay that you're not okay right now. It's okay if you need to see. I don't know why we need that as human beings, but we do, right? Like, I mean, I just kind of talked about an example earlier in 8th grade. Like, someone just saw me and said, like, it's okay to be poor. You still have value. Like, it's okay to come to the counseling center every day because you need a break, because I see what is happening in your life. It's okay. And I feel like just we need permission sometimes. And as employers, I understand that there are policy changes that a lot of employers probably could or should make when it comes to mental health. And I think we're working really hard to do that. Because for me as an individual and for me as a representative of Boys and Girls Club, it's one of the key pillars of things that we do. We have a mental health committee and a mental health program because we understand the importance and impact it can have on a child. The end. And I just think not just talking about it, but actually doing something about it is incredibly, incredibly important. And I feel like we're doing that as an organization, and I feel like I'm doing that more now. Because, there was a time in my life where I didn't tell anyone. Are you kidding me? It's embarrassing when you're in 8th grade to see a counselor every week. Why?
So I want to talk about the kids because so 3 months in, that little girl reminds you of who you are and why you're here. And I wonder, because you're communicating with and working with kids who, like, you see yourself in them. Yeah. And you can't save all these kids, and you know that too. But I mean, like, talk about that challenge, because oh my gosh, of course you want to save them all. And I mean, if you could have a Brandy Harris house and it's just like full of all the kids,
everyone live with me.
But I mean, talk about that too, because you have this moment with them and then they go back. Yeah. So what is that moment? How do you view that moment, and what do you talk to your employees about too, of this moment we have with these kids?
Yeah. And it's such a small moment in the grand scheme of things. It really is. There's a couple of responses I have to that. First is that so many of our families and our parents are working so hard. And what I really love about the future of this organization in this community is that we are working really collaboratively with other organizations to holistically serve kids and families. Parents are struggling now too. A lot of our parents are trying their very best every single day and are considering Boys and Girls Club a godsend. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that specific phrase. When I did my listening and learning tour, godsend, safe, fun, these words are things that people associate with Boys and Girls Club when they're living it. Wow. And that is remarkable.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to understand it's not just the kid that we're serving. We're serving the unit, and we're serving the community, and we're investing in the community with Boys and Girls Clubs. So, you know, that specific example of that little girl asking me what a CEO is and then saying, I want to be a CEO. You know, was a unique moment for that, but not unique for those moments happen often for me, and honestly are the moments that re-energize me and help me remember the why behind all of the stuff that isn't as glamorous, right? Like I will never forget. It's also been incredibly healing for me, honestly. I will never forget being at the GEM event, which is this annual event that we host for girls. It's called the Girls Empowerment Movement Summit, GEM. And we had a panel of female leaders, and I was on it. Yeah. And we were just talking about our experiences, and then we opened up questions for kids to ask. And there was a kid who asked me this specific question, said, if someone does something like really bad to you, do you or did you ever blame yourself for that? And in that moment, I'm like, God, you're 12. But I know exactly what you're talking about. And now I can use a terrible experience in my life to tell you that it is not your fault. And I can be a mentor for this person, and I can help. And it's like all of a sudden, this very negative thing turns into power and something I can embrace and I can own and I can use to help somebody who has experienced something similar to me. And that, I mean, in some ways it's kind of selfish that I'm the CEO, because I get like moments like that where I can just really have the energy and motivation to like, this is what I'm going to do. And this does change kids' lives, changes the trajectory of their lives, gives them hope. And those moments happen often, and often for our staff members too. The job is not glamorous at all times. Like I'm painting it like, oh, every moment is amazing, right? Most moments are amazing. Even in the darkest moments at the club, like if we've got a kid who is acting out in anger, or we got a kid who's falling behind academically, like those moments are really hard, because every staff member who works for our organization is working diligently to provide an awesome future for every kid who walks through our blue doors. But some days are really hard. But then those moments where you see some growth in a kid, or you see a kid getting angry less, or you see a B turn into an A, or a D turn into a C, or you see like someone's participating in volleyball and they never wanted to be involved in a sport before, but they're trying something new. And it's like, those are the kind of things that are like, this is bigger than a job, and this is bigger than like, this is healing, and this is opportunity for people who need it. How special is that? Like how fortunate am I to like be here now and being able to like do that with my life and get paid for it? I just, yeah, it's overwhelming. It's a lot. But something that I teach at Boys and Girls Clubs and with staff, and I think across the movement, is that there are no neutral interactions with kids. It will either be a good one, it will either be a bad one.
Okay.
There are no neutral interactions. Every moment you have with a child when they are in your care can mean and will mean something to that child, no matter how big or how small. I mean, today I'm 34 and I'm talking about a moment in 8th grade where a teacher said, be my teacher's aide. Help me with yearbook. Arguably was like, hey, do more work for me so I don't have to do it. And I was like, yeah, I want to do that. I remember that moment. Every single moment So if I get frustrated, yes, that's happened. Are you kidding me? When I was on the front lines with kids, there were times where I would get so frustrated or so upset at something that happened with a kid. But it is my responsibility as the adult to show that kid kindness to the best of my ability, or to show that kid I see them, or to show that kid you're angry right now, but it's not because you're mad at me. There's something else there. Let's work on this together. Not everybody's cut out for that life. Not everyone can do that. And I'm very grateful for the team of people we have that can do that. You know what I mean? It's no neutral interactions with kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do kids need to be like successful? Is it simple? Or
in my mind, it is so simple.
Yeah.
But for some reason, it's very difficult. Kids need to be fed. Kids need an adult. It literally only takes one, an adult that sees them, that believes in them, and is like irrational about how much they love this kid. And tells them every day that they're capable, that they're beautiful, that they're important, that just pours everything they can into that kid. It takes one person. And I'm telling you, 56% of club alumni say the club literally saved their life. Not just like, hey, here's this safe place I get to go to after school. Not that the kids don't really frame it that way. They're like, I get to go play air hockey, right? But alumni saved their life, changed the trajectory of their life. That's not a small number. I just think the other % just don't know it yet, that the club is life-changing and saved their life. But I think a caring adult is the most important thing, and it's so easy to me. But that's what I love so much about Boys and Girls Clubs is in order to work there, in order to step foot in any club that I am associated with, you have to be a little bit irrational about how much you want to protect and care for kids.
You talked about imposter syndrome. So now it's like Brandy Harris, CEO. Speak to the things you have accomplished, because you just went through a really hard COVID-19. I mean, we talked about your mental health, but I mean, you guys revamped the club, provided services in a different way, figured out how to keep employees on board.
Yeah.
Talk about the things that you have accomplished, because I think that speaks to flipping the narrative on that imposter syndrome. Like when you can speak to, this is what I've done, though.
Right. March 18th, we closed our doors. And that was so hard. That was so hard for so many people, for families, for staff. The hardest professional decision I've ever had to make. It was well-informed and it was absolutely necessary. But it's the antithesis of what I wanted to do, right? I want to open clubs.
Yeah.
I want to open new clubs, and I had to close them because it was the right decision, and I know that. On March 19th, the day after, we shifted gears, and it was like, again, when I talk about my childhood, I lived in chaos a lot and stress. And I think what COVID-19 has helped me understand is that those moments were kind of building me for this. There are not many leaders who can function in chaos and who can adapt quickly. And that's exactly what we had to do. And it's not like, we had to do this just because. Like, people's lives were at stake a little bit here. We had families who, while qualified for government assistance, could not find food or essential items on the shelves.
Wow.
We had kids who were hungry. And I'm telling you that if you put the right people in the room, and if you put people in a room who know what it's like to go a day without eating, they will figure out how to feed 44,000 meals to people during COVID-19. So in a lot of ways, those experiences before helped me empathize and understand what maybe people were feeling during COVID. And there was nothing that was going to stop our team from making sure people were fed, had the things that they needed, and that we could bridge any gaps that we could actually bridge. And while the club looked different and felt different, the mission was the same. Our mission is to enable all young people, especially those who need us most, to reach their full potential as productive, caring, responsible citizens. We still have a responsibility to do that. We don't just get to be like, okay, well, we get a break for a couple of months. No. Arguably, the need is higher now. So we shifted to food distribution. We shifted very quickly to provide a virtual programming platform. So we needed to maintain meaningful connections, provide a sense of normalcy for our families and for our kids. Like, you still want to see staff? Okay, let's figure out a safe, good way to do this virtually. You still want access to what a club day looks like? Okay, here's a schedule you can do at home. You want virtual content? Here you go. Here are staff working so hard to create videos of what they would normally perform or what they would normally do in a gym, and then adapting it for home. We were delivering hotspots and laptops to kids to make sure that they have the same opportunities as others. We served an additional 575 people in the community, not just club families, because the need was there, and our locations of our buildings were very convenient for families who needed assistance. We partnered with Care to Learn to provide hygiene items. That's the thing too, leaders who can collaborate and collaborate effectively, you just serve people better. Once you put egos aside and you realize, together, we could be so much better and stronger for a family and for a kid, it's just better. That's it. We shifted really quickly. We had 96 staff members that all maintained their jobs. They got new job descriptions, honestly. But the kind of people we have working at our team, we're just okay, whatever it takes. It's changed pretty much every 2 weeks. It's we have to build a new Boys and Girls Club infrastructure every 2 weeks. Not everyone is cut out for that. And it's very stressful, and it's overwhelming, and it is hard. But it's our job, and there's nothing else. Yeah, I think COVID helped me understand why. It helped me reframe a lot of my trauma. You know how to deal with this because you've lived it and dealt with it. Not COVID specifically, but the chaos and the going without food and the falling behind academically. So everything in my being was how do we figure out how to make sure this doesn't happen as badly as it could for kids? Okay, let's go.
So, and I go back to what the board president said when they hired you, right? Uniquely qualified to inspire people. So you realize your experience brought you to this moment. Do you feel now, today, yes, I earned this job? I am the CEO of Boys and Girls Club?
Oh my. Also, I like that you use the word earn instead of deserve there, because a lot of people say that I, not a lot, but some people have said that I deserve this job, and that, that word has a lot of meaning for me, and I don't ever frame this as something I deserve. I really don't even really believe anyone really deserves anything except for kids deserve to be loved. I think I will always struggle with that. I think I am in a much better place now because honestly, as I mentioned before, I am done trying to be a CEO. I just am one. And yes, I'm different and awkward and just weird, but I do not fit the typical CEO role, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. I just am done trying to be something that I'm not.
Yeah.
And that took a long time to get here. And I'm done trying to be a CEO. I am one. It's so weird how those 3 letters can have such an impact. I don't understand why. I think there's an expectation around those chief executive officer. You're important? What does it mean? I don't. Ugh. I'm done trying to be a CEO. I am one. I think I will always struggle with, am I good enough? And I will always struggle with doubt. I think that's been ingrained in me at a very young age. And I think it's normal. I think a lot of people deal with that. I think a lot of people question themselves, especially in leadership positions. And honestly, it's okay. And if you are doubting your ability or your impact or your capabilities or whatever, I just encourage you to reach out to someone. Not even a therapist necessarily. Call me if you need a pep talk, because I've lived it and I understand it. And it's so easy for me to see the beauty in almost anything that is put in front of me, especially now. If I just look at my life, I'm not saying I'm like so glad all of these very negative things happened to me in my life, but I'm now at a stage in my life where I can understand maybe why they happened and how they have helped me be better today.
Brandy, thank you so much for sharing your heart and being so vulnerable. I think you're going to get a lot of calls from people.
I wish they would. Well, don't call me. Just text me. My God.
Text.
Or email me, please. This was very important. I was very nervous to do this. You know, I mean, it's like people know what I present to them, and I really want to fill space with energy and positivity, and I want to highlight people, and I want to like make the world brighter because there's darkness, especially now. But like this is real life, and I don't know, it's just important that I am as honest about the darkness as I am about the light, I think. So thank you for the opportunity to do this, and I'm glad that I did.
Thanks for listening. You can subscribe to No Ceiling from SBJ Podcasts wherever you find your podcasts, or watch videos from the interviews by visiting sbj.net/No Ceiling. This show is produced by AdSmith Studio, with special thanks to Dustin Henderson and Joe Stearns. Photography and design by SBJ's Mackenzie Robinson. American National Insurance is the show's presenting sponsor, with support by Great Southern Bank. I'm Christine Temple, and this is No Ceiling.